The anime begins by introducing Ragna, a spoiled guy who's always looked after by Leonica, a small girl with special powers. She's really good at fighting dragons, so people call her a dragon hunter. After a tough battle, Ragna thanks Leonica. As they head back to their group, Ragna seems sad, thinking about a bad dream he had where Leonica dies. Soon, they reach their group and given the dragon stuff they collected. Soon after, Ragna gets paid and gives some to Leonica. They relax and eat together, but Sakes, another person in their group, makes Leonica upset by calling Ragna weak. There, Leonica gets mad and threatens Sakes, so they decide to leave. On their way home, Ragna keeps worrying about Leonica. When they get home, Ragna practices fighting while Leonica rests. Suddenly, he meets a guy who says he's from the future and tells Ragna that Leonica will die. Upon hearing that, Ragna decides he needs to get stronger to protect her. The next day, Leonica and Ragna went to the guild to find a mission, but there wasn't anything tough available, so they decided to relax. While chilling out, they heard some gossip about a city called Donapur. Leonica got super excited because it's known for its delicious cakes, but then they heard chaos from a nearby village because of a dragon. They decided to go hunt it. At that time, Ragna tried to fight the dragon, but Leonica jumped in first and used her powers to beat it up. However, the dragon got angrier. Seeing Leonica in trouble made Ragna furious. Suddenly, a guy from Ragna's future showed up and they combined their powers, making Ragna super strong. He fought the dragon like a boss and scared it off. After the battle, Ragna hugged Leonica and cried. The next day, Ragna woke up and talked to Leonica, but their moment was ruined by Sakes, who questioned Ragna about his sudden strength. Ragna got tired and fell asleep, calling out for Leonica in his dreams. Suddenly, Leonica saw chaos in the forest and went to check it out. The following day, we find ourselves at the lair of a scary monster named Temrogtav, who's here on Earth to wreck everything. At that time, Temrogtav tells his servants to make dinner, and when the food arrives, he looks super excited and gobbles it up, because it's made by famous chefs, but he still wants something fresher, like the chef himself. The chef is shocked to hear this, and even more shocked when Temrogtav eats him right in front of everyone, scaring them all. Meanwhile, Leonica rushes to fight the monsters destroying her village. With her silver sword, she defeats them and heads straight for Temrogtav's hideout. But the monsters cause chaos in the village, even wrecking Sakes' house. Suddenly, Leonica sees Ragna captured by a monster. But Ragna remembers Leonica and fights back, taking down several dragon monsters. This surprises Leonica and the others. They'd all head to Temrogtav's hideout and find him being careless, which annoys Ragna. Soon after, Ragna attacks, surprising Temrogtav, and with Leonica's help, they get rid of Temrogtav, solving the problem quickly. At one point, Ragna asked Leonica to go home because things were getting really scary. But Leonica didn't want to leave him alone and insisted on staying with Ragna. Unfortunately, they ended up arguing and Ragna kicked Leonica out. Feeling defeated, Leonica went home with Sakes. Before the fight, Ragna attacked Leonica, making her fall. Then, Ragna acted strangely, accusing Eliza of being the Crimson Dragon King. But Eliza didn't agree because she saw herself as just Eliza. The truth was, the power of the Crimson Dragon hadn't awakened in Eliza yet because it was still sealed. But Ragna kept insisting until he got overwhelmed and passed out. While unconscious, Ragna met Crimson and talked about Eliza not trusting him. After some time, Ragna woke up and kept arguing with Eliza. But after talking, Eliza started to act more like Crimson. Then, Ragna and Crimson teamed up to fight the dragon monster. The dragons got scared because Ragna and Eliza, now under Crimson's influence, destroyed them. Finally, they finished off the dragon. Soon after, Ragna and Crimson started talking and learning about each other's personalities. Ragna really wanted to team up with Crimson to defeat the dragon, but wasn't that simple. Crimson had conditions for Ragna to follow, and to make sure he obeyed, Crimson gave Ragna the poison. If Ragna disobeyed, he would die because of the poison. Meanwhile, the Wind Dragon caused chaos in the city by attacking and hurting women. The dragon didn't kill them right away, but instead tortured them slowly, making the dragon hunters furious. Soon after, Ragna and Crimson also joined the fight against the dragons. But they hadn't heard anything about the Wind Dragon yet. They were too busy fighting, and Crimson didn't trust Ragna. Plus, Ragna seemed to forget about his powers from the past. Still, Ragna tried to convince Crimson to keep using him to defeat the dragon. After defeating the dragon, Ragna and Crimson showed off to the hunters. There, Crimson introduced herself as a wizard and Ragna as the god of death. Soon after, Michael, the head of the dragon hunters, asked for their help. He told them about the wind dragon, and Ragna was eager to go, but Crimson made him faint. At that time, Crimson wanted to control Ragna, so she agreed to help the city residents, but she planned to use the hunters as soldiers. The next day, Crimson showed the hunters the weapons and boosted their confidence so they could fight the dragon. Shortly after, Ragna woke up, and he and Crimson talked about Leonica. Ragna said he didn't want her to be in danger, so Crimson suggested locking her in a chest until they defeated the dragon. After Leonica was freed, she met Ragna again, but Ragna got upset when he heard Crimson's tricky plan. However, Crimson convinced Ragna to listen and follow her orders. She promised to help protect Leonica, so Ragna could focus on fighting the dragon. So Crimson gathered her gang to fight the dragon. Meanwhile, everyone was ready to fight the wind dragon. Crimson and her gang attacked it while Michael and the other hunters got ready to take it down. But when they saw how huge the dragon was, they got scared despite all their training. Still, Crimson had a plan. The hunters attacked with special bullets covered in Ragna's power. These bullets shook the dragon, but Crimson had an even bigger surprise. They attacked with even stronger bullets, covering Ragna with his power. This shocked the dragon even more, and they were captured by Crimson's gang. During a certain event, Slime, who was a friend of Crimson, decided to capture a wind dragon. They used a silver weapon to pierce the dragon, defeating it. The dragon was surprised and didn't realize it was almost morning, so it burned in the sunlight. Afterward, Ragna and Crimson got together to celebrate their victory. At their base, the hunters thanked Crimson for her help, but Crimson erased their memories of her involvement, so they turned to Ragna with gratitude and quickly left. Meanwhile, King Femid was in a meeting with his subordinates when suddenly Ultimacia and her friends appeared. There, Ultimacia apologized to King Femid for her group destroying the city of Donapur. Initially, the king was impressed by Ultimacia's seemingly good character, but he soon learned that she actually wanted to destroy the city and harm humans. The king decided to fight against Ultimacia, but her followers quickly killed him. Ultimacia then brought the king back to life and informed him of his previous death. This terrified King Femid, and he was forced to obey Ultimacia and work with her to eliminate the people. Next, we see Rice Country dealing with the challenge of displacement caused by the kingdom's dangerous situation. Ultimacia concluded her meeting with King Femid and approached the Lightning Claw Dragon, a member of her group. There she informed the dragon that some members of their gang had vanished. What shocked her even more was that Dornia had been defeated by Starlia. At that time, Ultimacia urged Voltaica Mui to investigate and find the culprit behind the gang's massacre. She promised to forgive Voltaica Mui for any mistakes and returned him to his human form from his previous skull form. After receiving his assignment, Voltaica Mui hurriedly left. Meanwhile, Ragna and his friends rushed to the old city. Ragna was asleep and dreaming of himself in the future, experiencing difficult events from his past. In his dream, adult Ragna was punished by Ultimacia's gang. Ultimacia wanted Ragna to join her team and use blood to create a binding agreement, but Ragna always refused. Despite Ultimacia's attempts to force him, Ragna remained steadfast. Later, Ragna was shocked by a terrifying dream about his future self. Soon after, he and his friends arrived in the old city and hurried off the train. During the journey, Ragna became very anxious because he had a fear of crowds. Usually, he could manage with Leonica by his side, but this time Crimson tried to help him overcome his fear. She taught him some techniques to cope with his phobia before saying goodbye and continuing her journey to meet other friends. Meanwhile, General Rowan was enjoying himself with some ladies when Crimson interrupted, scaring him. She scolded Rowan for neglecting his duties and even called Chimera, her assistant, to join the meeting. Later at the hotel, Crimson and her team discussed their plan to fight the Winged King. They needed to prepare a strategy because the Winged King's side had formidable members. Then, Gollum, also known as General Rowan, got angry because Chimera showed up and disrupted his closeness with the boss. Crimson was annoyed to see her two subordinates fighting. Soon after, Gollum teased Chimera with confusing questions about counting, since she was half human and half animal, which only made things worse. At that time, Crimson scolded Gollum for bothering her partner, and she got serious, showing hidden cameras in the palace. Shortly after, they watched footage of the Winged King disturbing King Femid. Chimera explained how the Winged King suddenly appeared, and she was confused about why everything changed so quickly as if time had stopped. There, Crimson praised Chimera for understanding the situation well, despite not being good at math. At that moment, Golem found Chimera's strategic skills amusing. Meanwhile, Ragna and Slime continued their journey and spotted the Winged King disguised as a woman. Soon after, Ultimacia approached a boy looking for his parents and offered to help. Ragna was shocked to see Ultimacia and tried to control his anger, but the arrival of Nebulim made him even more upset. Turns out, Nebulim was there to take Ultimacia back because the other members were searching for their leader. As Ragna ran off, trying to calm himself down, Slime got annoyed seeing him talking to himself. Then Ragna asked Slime to quickly get Crimson because he was planning to attack Ultimacia. Slime was surprised by Ragna's sudden disappearance and immediately informed Crimson, who was busy discussing with her colleagues. At that time, Crimson was shocked to hear that Ragna was taking action. Meanwhile, Ragna, feeling angry about past grudges, arrogantly attacked Ultimacia. He used his silver attack, but Ultimacia kept turning back time every time Ragna tried to kill her. The battle between them intensified with each side showing their power. In a flashback, adult Ragna is seen being tortured by the Winged King's gang because he refused to join their family. This annoyed Ultimacia, who decided to force Ragna to join her family. Then she stabbed him with a bloody sword to make it official. Ragna felt the pain but remembered Leonica's face, which brought him back to his senses. So Ragna decided to stab himself in the heart to remove the blood sword. Unfortunately, this caused him to die. In that moment, Ultimacia's gang tried to intervene, but Ragna was already gone. Soon after, Ultimacia and her family quickly flew back to headquarters on a Winddragon vehicle. Not long after, Crimson and her gang arrived, along with Slime and Golem. They were confused to find Ragna's body. Crimson ordered them to take Ragna as a test subject, thinking he might still be useful. Meanwhile, in the present, Crimson was furious because Ragna had broken the rules. However, she had no choice but to surrender. On the other hand, Ragna was determined to defeat Ultimacia. He launched a fierce attack, causing Ultimacia to repeatedly die and reset time. But if she died too many times, she might actually perish. So Borges, her subordinate, came to her aid. Suddenly, Golem attacked Borges to stop him. Meanwhile, Ragna continued to attack Ultimacia relentlessly. At the same time, Nebulim used barrier magic to protect Ultimacia, but Slime devoured Nebulim to remove the protection. This allowed Ragna to attack again. Ultimacia then stopped time, unable to bear seeing Ragna kill her repeatedly. When Ultimacia's powers stopped time for some of her siblings, she forgot that Ragna was also of her bloodline, so he remained unaffected. Soon after, Ragna immediately attacked, but Nebulim protected Ultimacia. Later, Ragna was killed by King Fimid, who was influenced by Borges. King Fimid used a weapon from his kingdom, which had the power to destroy Ragna. Soon after, Crimson and his friends arrived and found Ragna defeated. In the old city, Ragna continued to fight Ultimacia. She was surprised to see Ragna breaking free from her time manipulation, which she had only allowed for her gang. Soon after, Crimson took action, aiming to unsettle Ultimacia psychologically. He believed that she was only weak when scared. Suddenly, Crimson caused explosions around them, resulting in casualties and causing Ultimacia shock. She hadn't expected the battle to become so terrifying. Seeing the devastation and suffering, Ultimacia became provoked and considered turning back time, risking running out of mana and possibly dying. At that moment, Nebulim didn't want to use magic, so he asked Ultimacia to stop using it too. There, Ultimacia got scared and cried in Nebulim's arms. Then, Crimson and friends went to another world to hide, leaving Golem behind to watch their enemies. Meanwhile, Starlia was watching out for danger, but her friends told her to focus because the general had news about an intruder. They said Ragna somehow got stronger because he dreamed of Leonica and woke her up. Ragna also used his power to get past Ultimacia's defenses, but Nebulim was upset about something with Ultimacia. Soon after, he went to look for Crimson and Ragna, but turns out they had already escaped to another world. Almost getting caught, Ragna's power gave away Crimson's location to Nebulim. At that time, Crimson told Golem to attack Nebulim, but Golem got attacked by Borges. Shortly after, Starlia hurried back when she heard there was an intruder, so Crimson was quickly taken to a meeting room. In there, Crimson was questioned, but she cleverly made up a story to avoid being caught by Starlia. Starlia, being observant, noticed something strange about Crimson's eyes. In the meeting room, Starlia questioned Crimson, thinking she seemed suspicious. Crimson lied skillfully to avoid getting caught. She pretended to be a hidden magician. Using a special look in her eyes, she almost convinced Starlia and her gang. But Starlia eventually figured out Crimson's trickery. She attacked Crimson, who then tried to escape when the Silver Gang thought she was dead. However, Ragna showed up and rescued her. Starlia and her friends were surprised to see Garm, a member of the Silver Gang, injured by Ragna. Soon after, Ragna fought off the Silver Gang members who tried to attack him. Meanwhile, Starlia remembered a conversation with Nazarena about finding a perfect soulmate. She even found herself attracted to Ragna, making her gang scold her for being too obvious. Eventually, Ragna and Crimson were put in prison while Starlia decided on their punishment. The next day, Isaac talks to his partner about removing Crimson, but they can't do anything about Ragna yet because Starlia likes him. They watch as people are evacuated below to protect them from Ultimatia's gang, who want to harm humanity. Meanwhile, Starlia and her friends are busy with important meetings. At that time, Ragna and Crimson's arrival interrupts them, so Starlia tells her members to focus on their tasks. When two lawyers arrive, Starlia and her friends get annoyed. Shortly after, Crimson joins them, knowing what they're going to talk about. It's a good time to work with Starlia's gang because both Starlia and Crimson are being chased by another gang. In prison, Ragna and Crimson talk about the Winged Gang. Crimson suggests they escape together and team up to defeat Ultimatia later, but Ragna has to control his emotions during the fight. In the present time, Ragna convinces Starlia to let him and Crimson join a mission. In that moment, Starlia hides her growing feelings for Ragna and agrees to his request. Meanwhile, Ultimatia is encouraged by Volte Kamui. He helps her overcome her fear by making her angry instead. This helps Ultimatia release her pent-up sadness and return to normal. Next, in the meeting room of the Silver Gang, Ragna prepares to enhance the gang's weapons with his power. This will make their weapons stronger. He's tasked with boosting the weapons of his fellow gang members. Ragna fights each member of the gang one by one. Some of them get annoyed by his strength and want to test him. But Ragna gets tired because he uses up a lot of his power. He remembers what Crimson told him in prison, that he should take breaks from using his power and share with others to make them stronger soldiers. Back in the present, Ragna faces off against a tough opponent, but gets embarrassed when he's quickly defeated. Meanwhile, the Ultimatia gang is still planning their attack on the Silver Gang. On another front, the Wizard team is busy setting up a teleportation spot to escape. They need a lot of mana power to make it work. Meanwhile, Hazella and Glee chat with Ragna, but suddenly Slime appears, causing trouble with his rude comments about the Silver Gang. Crimson uses a bit of magic to revive Slime, who keeps insulting everyone. Despite being annoyed, Hazella and Glee try to be polite to him. However, Ragna doesn't care much and doesn't realize Slime is actually being tortured by the twins' annoyance. On the other hand, the Winged Gang continues their meetings, discussing their strategy. Nangulim predicts that Ragna will eventually show up with his grudge against Ultimatia. Other members suggest sharing their issues with each other during meetings. Starlia also talks to Isaac about Crimson, warning him not to trust her too much because she believes half of what Crimson says are lies. Because of that, Starlia and her friends shouldn't trust Crimson. But then, Isaac warned them not to ignore what Crimson said about Zora and Terratectora, because they used to be regular humans but are now super strong. That's why Crimson herself was scared to face them directly. But Starlia disagreed, thinking their group, the Silver Gang, had strong fighters too. So Isaac assured everyone not to worry. Meanwhile, Ragna woke up after a long sleep and talked with Crimson about the upcoming battle. Crimson promised to explain why Ragna couldn't use the power of silver. Also, Volte Kamui was furious at Ragna for causing Ultimatia's injury and would definitely chase him. Volte Kamui, being very strong like Ragna, might even defeat him. Now we see Fu, who's feeling stressed. Fu talks about Crimson helping fix transportation stuff and praises her for being both skilled and modest. Fu thinks the Wizard Gang might be pretending to be dumb while fixing things. The next day, Starlia showed Ragna a sword she made and asked him to promise something serious. She wanted him to lead their group if she ever couldn't. Ragna didn't agree, saying they should keep hope alive instead. But there, Starlia got upset but also kind of happy because Ragna stood his ground. Later, they had to fight dragons that attacked them. Then, at their base, Zora and Terratectora showed up with a gang of dragons. The dragon gang attacked too, using drugs to turn people into zombie monsters, upon knowing that Isaac and his team protected the innocent people. But there Isaac got worried seeing the possessed humans, remembering what Crimson said about the drugs the dragons used. He warned his team to fight back, but the zombies were fierce, fighting the Silver Gang. Soon after, Ragna decided to fight back against Terratectora, who always acted so proud because he thought he could beat Ragna easily. But Ragna was struggling because he wasn't feeling great and couldn't use his full strength since he was holding back his silver power. Meanwhile, Zora was keeping watch in the forest and didn't sense Ragna's fighting spirit, so he figured Ragna hadn't shown up yet. And Ragna, indeed, wasn't using his special silver moves. In Ragna's intense battle, he got exhausted, and Shin scolded him for being weak. People were saying Ragna was supposed to be this amazing dragon hunter, but now he was getting beaten easily. Shin wanted Ragna to get strong again so they could finish the mission of killing dragons. It seemed like Ragna showed up late on purpose and let others fight so he could swoop in later and look like the hero. Soon after, Ragna finally joined the fight to help his friends, but he was still confused by Shin's anger. Meanwhile, Starlia was getting ready to take down Zora. She had a secret plan to fight him, and Zora was also getting ready to attack Starlia. Meanwhile, Isaac is doing his best to protect his troops from the dragons. He's taking strong action to fight them off because the dragons are a threat to him and his friends. Suddenly, the dragon stops time. He freezes everyone and leaving them vulnerable. In that moment, Isaac tries his hardest to defeat the dragon despite this tricky situation. Things get even more chaotic when Crimson shows up. She throws a white ball at the dragon, which burns and makes it disappear because time has stopped. Isaac is surprised, but glad to see Crimson helping out. Now we're back on the battlefield where Ragna and his friends are fighting a group of dragons. Ragna takes on the dragon messengers sent by Zora, using his silver power to fight them. There, he launches a fierce attack against the dragons. On the other hand, now Crimson is playfully bothering Fusi, who is Midorka's sister. At that time, Fusi tries to resist the magical influence Crimson has over everyone. She believes that Crimson has control over them, making them do whatever she wants. But then, Crimson threatens Fusi, saying she'll make Fusi her slave. Suddenly, Majorca steps in to stop Crimson's craziness, but Crimson ends up killing Majorca for interfering too much. This terrifies Fusi because his brother is being hurt. Crimson gains more power over Fusi and forces him to obey her. Suddenly, Majorca returns with the power of her god, shocking Fusi and his friends. She's glowing with light and takes action, teleporting Crimson and her friends away to punish them. Crimson is actually excited to see Midorka's power, thinking she can use it someday. Next, the scene shifts in the forest where Zora and Terratectora are keeping watch. At that time, they're talking about how to defeat Starlia. Zora is annoyed because Ragna helped the Argentum Corps, so he's planning to lure Voltaikamui to the capital. Meanwhile, Crimson is worried because she and her friends got teleported to another island. She wants things to go back to normal so they can continue their mission. Ragna and his friends are traveling to the forest to help the Argentum Corps. Not long after, Starlia wakes up and joins the fight against Zora. Then, Terratectora also jumps in to help. At that time, Starlia thinks they're winning, but Zora gets back up, annoying her. She encourages her team to keep fighting. Zora is shaken by Starlia's power, and she launches a fierce attack. Meanwhile, in the middle of the battlefield where Ragna is facing off against Terratectora. Ragna tries to attack Terratectora with his silvern sword, but it backfires. At that time, Terratectora sacrifices himself, causing an explosion that affects Ragna and his friends. Even though they're struggling, Ragna is determined to win. He asks Slan to take him to Terratectora's location. On the other hand, Terratectora and Zora have a heartfelt moment, reminiscing about the past. Zora has feelings for Starlia, while Terratectora only admires her. But Terratectora feels guilty for lying. Back in the present, Terratectora sacrifices himself to stop the explosion caused by his mistake. Then Ragna uses his powers to help, but the explosion overwhelms him. Meanwhile, Princess Starlia, who has feelings for Ragna, rushes to help him. Together, they use their powers to save the world. But just when they think they've won, Voltaikamui appears, stopping their victory. Soon after, Ragna jumps back into action, fighting Voltaikamui with all his might. During the fight, he remembers a conversation with Crimson about Voltaikamui's strength. Despite his efforts, Ragna eventually runs out of energy and accepts defeat. Next, Starlia and Ragna found themselves in a strange place after teleporting. There, Ragna thanks Starlia for her help, but Starlia was surprised because she thought Ragna should be the one thanking her. On their journey, Starlia told Ragna about her team. After their chat, Starlia said goodbye and sent Ragna back to the real world, waking him up from his sleep. Soon after, Ragna was shocked to find himself in a refugee camp. He left his tent and met Slime. Later, Isaac asked Ragna to meet someone. Ragna went with Isaac and was shocked when he met a woman named Carla. He thought she was the Wind Queen because she looked similar, but he found out she has many twins. So Ragna asked Carla to bring his twin back to life to protect Isaac from Carla's punishment. Upon hearing that, Carla agreed and revived Ragna's twin. At that time, Isaac was surprised by Carla's strange behavior. Carla and Ragna then talked about negotiations, with Carla threatening Ragna to join her in hunting winged dragons. There, Ragna felt angry seeing refugees being mistreated, but he had to follow Carla's orders. Later, Ragna and Slime met Crimson in his lab. Ragna woke up from a treatment and talked with Crimson. Crimson mentioned Princess Starlia's death, but Ragna refused to believe it and asked for help to save her. Crimson refused, angering Ragna, who considered betraying him. At that moment, Crimson warned Ragna that he might die if they fought, reminding him of their previous oath when Ragna ingested poison. Despite the warning, Ragna attacked Crimson. Before, Ragna had taken a poison oath with Crimson, but when he survived after taking the poison, it shocked Crimson. This surprised Ragna too, as he didn't expect to come back to life. Still, he didn't stay quiet and fought against Chimera and the members of Crimson, surprising them all. Meanwhile, Starlia was being pressured by Volte Kamui to make swords for her and Ragna, so they could fight better. Soon after, Ragna decided to meet with Starlia's team to help save her. The next day, Crimson's colleague persuaded her to calm down and use Ragna and his friends as bait to fight Ultimacia. Hearing that, Crimson agreed and made plans to confront Ultimacia. At that time, Slime and the others were confused by Crimson's actions, but went along with it. Meanwhile, in the wilderness, Isaac's troops were on guard. They were already planning to rescue Starlia. There, Nazarena informed them about Starlia, feeling a strong sylvan aura in the enemy territory. This gave them hope and made them eager to rescue Starlia. The following day, Ragna bumped into Garm. There, Garm asked how Ragna was feeling, and after hearing he was okay, Garm decided to spar with him to help him get stronger. He tossed his weapon in front of Ragna, and after a while of practicing, Ragna managed to block Garm's attacks. They then chose to talk instead of continuing to spar. Suddenly, Garm praised Ragna's skills from the previous battle and believed he could become even stronger and save the world. On the other side, Fusi and his friends were still in the forest when the troops from the Argentum Corps were suddenly teleported there by the church monastery. They were ready to fight against the Ultimacia troops. There, Volte Kamui eagerly awaited Ragna and his friends' arrival, determined to protect Ultimacia at all costs. He was ready to fight the Argentum Corps to ensure her safety, even if it meant defeating Ragna and his group. At that moment, Ragna rushed to Starlia's side. She was lying weak on the ground, hurt by Volte Kamui's cruel actions. Ragna was devastated to see her in such a critical condition and pleaded with her to wake up and help him. Sadly, Starlia had already passed away, leaving Ragna heartbroken. Soon Nazarena appeared and took over Starlia's body so Ragna could focus on fighting Volte Kamui. After that, Ragna and Volte Kamui clashed with all their might, fueled by anger. There, Volte Kamui seemed to enjoy Ragna's rage as they fought fiercely. Meanwhile, Starlia's team continued to support Ragna, fueled by their desire for revenge against those who hurt her. Saving Starlia seemed nearly impossible now, and she was taken away by Nazarena to keep her safe. Though they reached a safe place, Starlia was upset with Nazarena for wasting time on someone who almost died, even though Nazarena was still alive. Starlia asked Nazarena to leave, prompting Nazarena to reminisce about their past together. The focus then shifts to Ragna's intense battle, where he and his allies intensify their attacks to defeat the enemy. Meanwhile, Crimson was still pondering how to directly confront Ultimacia, which only fueled her excitement. Seizing the moment, Crimson made her move to take down Ultimacia. At the same time, Slime swiftly consumed Nabuline, who was trying to shield Ultimacia. With Nabuline out of the way, Crimson easily targeted Ultimacia and fired at her. Although initially shocked, Ultimacia tried to stay composed. However, as her injuries worsened and her ability to heal faded, panic set in, and she attempted to fight back against Crimson's cunning tactics. Meanwhile, Fu battled a dragon from the Ultimacia family, with Isaac assisting in the fight. Shin played a significant role as well, facing various challenges and attacks in the battle. Christopher also contributed, actively supporting his team in fighting the dragon. Currently, Fu is in a critical condition and needs time to recover, so he lies on the ground, waiting for his strength to return. On the other hand, Christopher, feeling confused, bravely faces the dragon, recalling memories of his mother. The scene then shifts to Christopher's mother, who was a mistress of the king. She always emphasized the importance of maintaining their status in the royal lineage to Christopher, who was obliged to obey her every command. Christopher felt overwhelmed by his mother's aspirations for nobility, despite the reality of her status as only a mistress. After her death, Christopher lived alone. Later, he met Starlia and joined her group, finding happiness and loyalty with them. In the present, Christopher feels nervous about battling the dragon but pushes himself to be stronger for the sake of his comrades. However, the strain becomes too much, and Christopher eventually gives up, feeling overwhelmed by the limitations of his strength. On the other hand, Fu is rested peacefully now. Then Isaac gently closed his eyes, ensuring he found eternal peace. Soon after, Nazarena joined Isaac, and they prepared for their next mission. Meanwhile, Crimson transformed into a more powerful form. Driven by determination, she launched a fierce attack on Ultimacia. Startled, Ultimacia looked on fearfully as Nebulim pleaded for help to save her. At that time, Nebulim, unable to continue, sacrificed himself for her. Carla had also perished, leaving only her throat, accompanied by a mysterious presence. In the battle between Crimson and Ultimacia, Crimson trapped Ultimacia in another dimension, preventing her members from saving their leader. Faced with defeat, Ultimacia surrendered to Crimson. However, Crimson still attacked Ultimacia, who quickly sought cover. At that time, Crimson persisted, and unexpectedly, Vorgas's voice emerged, aiming to rescue Ultimacia. Meanwhile, Chimera felt overwhelmed by the chaos but sought to find Boss Crimson. On the other hand, Ragna fought against Volte Kamui, determined to defeat his arrogance. Suddenly, a child with godlike powers appeared, capable of defeating Volte Kamui. Provoked, Volte Kamui engaged in a fierce battle, believing he could overpower Ragna. However, Ragna proved to be stronger. They exchanged attacks, refusing to back down. In the end, Volte Kamui finally managed to knock off Ragna's head, but Ragna quickly reattached it and resumed the fight. Then, Volte Kamui remembered a moment with Carla, who tried to convince him to leave. Despite her efforts, Carla couldn't bear to abandon Volte Kamui and even tended to his wounds. Initially agreeing to leave, Carla returned to save Volte Kamui, which touched him deeply. This memory inspired him to keep fighting. Meanwhile, Ragna and Volte Kamui continued their intense battle. Their mutual anger fueled their determination. Suddenly, Volte Kamui attacked, but Ragna was equally determined, seeing it as his duty to defeat dragon descendants. That Ragna managed to defend against Volte Kamui's attack, surprising Volte Kamui himself. Meanwhile, the guards watching over Volte Kamui were disappointed in his failure to survive. Ultimacia, now in an animal form, was shocked to hear about Volte Kamui's defeat. She screamed for her men, intending to turn back time to save him, but her efforts were in vain. Then we see Ultimacia in the form of Carla, feeling a deep connection to the young Volte Kamui she once saved. Volte Kamui, grateful for her help, decides to spend time with Ultimacia in her Carla form. Back in the present, Ultimacia is badly injured from her fight with Crimson. Despite her wounds, she chooses to face her past sins and meet her companions in the afterlife. Ultimacia lets herself be consumed by the morning sun's heat. Meanwhile, Ragna is taken to Crimson's laboratory. After a while, Ragna was brought out of the void and taken to a hospital by Crimson. He was surprised to find Starlia lying there. Shortly after, Ragna approached her, hoping she would wake up soon. The next day, Ragna and his friends left to continue their journey. Suddenly, Shin, who was recovering, asked Ragna to wait for him to catch up. Once he was better, Shin planned to join Ragna and Crimson. So Ragna and the others hurried on with their journey. The anime ends. The moral lesson from this anime is when facing a dragon, don't forget your snacks. Because even if you can't beat him with brawn, you can always out-snack him.